Hey guys, and welcome back to my monthly Now Playing series. In this series, I go through the games I played in the last month, explain what the game is, give a quick first impression, progress report, and if I'll continue playing more, I've decided I've had enough. February 2024 was actually quite an eventful month for me, and I saw myself playing 4 different games. Just to give you some context, I often find myself playing 2 games at once, and one's a game I have to concentrate on, and the other one's like a brain off game, like usually grinding game or something where the story takes a backseat. The first game I started and finished this month was We Love Katamari REROLL plus Royal Reverie on the Nintendo Switch. I was a huge fan of the first game, and I actually only started the entire series a couple of years after the remaster was released for Switch around 2018, and I instantly fell in love. The music, the concept itself, the hilarious cutscenes, the overall lore and story of the game, and that addictive gotta catch 'em all gameplay all came together and formed a new love for the series. I had always heard a little bit about it here and there when it came out for the PS2 way back when, but I never had a chance to actually try it out. So when I heard that there was a sequel to the remaster with some added DLC levels, it was instantly on my list. If you somehow never heard of this game or even the We Love Katamari series, it's a game in which you roll around a sticky ball and try to collect increasingly larger and larger objects that go from literally the smallest coin to finally buildings once you get big enough. The goal of the game is creating a big sticky ball so that you can turn them into stars that you launch up into space because your dad, the king of the cosmos, wants to roll up the sun into your ball. The controls of the ball are actually quite unique and are really intuitive once you get the hang of them. Essentially, you use the 2 thumbsticks to move forward. You can rotate your player around the ball by using only 1 stick at a time, and there's a couple of other moves you can do. It makes for a well-controlled adventure, and most of the time the errors you make are your fault and not the game's. More Katamari is more Katamari. The sequel is just as great as the first, and I still adore this series. I should probably try and follow the story a little bit more, as it seems like there's a lot going on and they have a lot to say. But rolling your thing into increasingly bigger and bigger things until you eventually swallow up the entire planet is one of the greatest gameplay loops out there. In We Love Katamari REROLL, the usual goal of the levels is to get this big in this amount of time, but there are also levels that have different challenges, such as collect everything except even one of these items, or make the biggest snowball you can, or collect as many candies as you can, or even roll your sumo guy over enough food so that he eats it all and gets big enough to roll over this other sumo guy. Once all the regular levels are done, there's the Royal Reverie DLC to try. This DLC wasn't in the original PS2 title, and in those levels, you're actually the current king, but back when he was a kid. And his dad was treating him the same way he's treating you, who you play as in the future. That is to say, he's always mean to him, and he gives him tough levels to try and beat. And as goes the way of the world most of the time, the child is at very least a little bit better than the parents were to them, so this guy's pretty bad. The levels of the Royal Reverie DLC are in fact new content, and well, they gave it a shot. At some points, the new levels are a breath of fresh air and bring new challenges to the Katamari gameplay loop, and at some points they're, in my opinion, like super weird, difficult levels, but different strokes for different folks. There's a couple of levels where you get to go back and complete the same map level again with a completely different or more difficult objective. I really enjoyed these, as some of the levels are great, but they're just over way too quickly. All they really needed, in my opinion, was just a new map or 2, but instead they opted for these weird goals in older maps. There's a specific level that comes to mind, and it's when you're trying to collect 5 musical instruments, but you're not allowed to touch any of the ghosts. If you did, the level instantly game overs and you have to restart. I was super excited for the challenge of dodging everything and only collecting 5 items, which is really unique for this game. The level itself is the school level from the main game, but now it's haunted. All the lights are off because ghosts can see in the dark, of course. All in all, it sounds like a fun concept. Search the map, find the 5 instruments, and move on, but it turns into like basically a memory maze. The ghosts move all over the map. They do so extremely quickly, but what sucks is they even come up from underneath the ground, instantly ending your run. So you basically have to memorize, like, oh, don't step there. Like, it's a memory maze. You basically have to memorize exactly where to go at exactly what time in the run. As I wasn't really in the mood to memorize enemy and item locations during a level of a Katamari game, I took the 2 instruments I found right near the start and moved on to another level. It's one of those levels that the people who want a challenge will adore and beat, but for me, Katamari is more like a vibes and dopamine type game and less of a really beat this tough level for gratification type of game. All in all, if you like Katamari, like I said, here is more Katamari. If you haven't tried Katamari, please do yourself a favor and try this one or the first one. They're definitely worth your time. At this point, I've finished the game and I still come around every so often for a quick level here and there because, like I said, the gameplay loop is one of the best out there. Next title I played this month is Silent Hill: The Short Message on PS5, a free 2-hour first-person Silent Hill game. Let's preface this with I adore horror games. Silent Hill, Resident Evil, PT, and whatever random scary games are still out there. So to hear that Silent Hill put out their own short horror experience for free out of nowhere was extremely exciting to me, and I went out of my way to get some playtime in right away. I ended up blasting through the game in about 2 hours, and about 30 minutes of that was me struggling through the final encounter. Silent Hill: The Short Message is honestly an extremely different experience for the Silent Hill series and feels more PT than Silent Hill, which isn't a bad thing at all, and I'm actually really excited for it. I'm happy to see changes to the traditional survival horror template. And if no one ever changed anything, we'd still be struggling to learn tank controls. No, I still haven't beaten Code Veronica. The Short Message's gameplay is a first-person perspective, and while there isn't any combat, it makes up for it with its chase sequences, scares, and storytelling. Silent Hill: The Short Message is about 3 teenage girls who live in a town that, well, it has some issues. In the past, there's been rumors of witches, there's a literal unalive yourself building, and there's always a planned revival of the town that for some reason or another never really takes place. At one point they blame the economy, another they blame 2020, but in all honesty, it was probably cursed by those witches. Also, seeing that 2020 event in video game worlds will never not be super insane to me. You play as Anita, a teenage high school student who reported to the unalive building after receiving bizarre text messages that requested her presence from her deceased friend Maya. Maya is Anita's friend who recently took her own life at that unalive building that seems to have taken a hold on this town. At one point, you see the area in which the unalivings happen, and there's a lot of different high school girls' memorial pictures. Once Anita arrives at the building, she finds literal craziness. There's a beautiful graffiti all over the walls, there's weird noises coming out from everywhere, there's mannequins that move around when you're not looking, which is one of my favorite horror game tropes, by the way. The building is obviously cursed, or Anita's dreaming. There's actual room sets that appear in the building in which horrible things had happened in Anita's home life, going so far as to bring her entire childhood home and school into the nightmare. There's these long, empty hallways with the walls covered in bullying post-it notes. There's an evil cherry blossom themed being that chases Anita through the halls, and it's just a general sense of evil and creepiness right down to the lighting. I could go into an entire spiel about that, but the lighting is well used to guide the player's way without being extremely obvious. After some exploration and a chase sequence or two, we start to learn that Maya was a growing artist, who, like everyone nowadays, has her own anonymous online haters, and they affected her a lot. Maya keeps texting Anita that she needs to find it, while never really explaining what it is. And after more events unfold, we discover that Anita's actually been in the building for months, and not even committing the building's namesake will let her out. Mobile phones, internet bullying, social media, and this always connected world we live in today, all of those themes interconnect and play a huge part in this title, as they are the reason for many, if not all, of the events within. Relatively a welcome change, as way too many horror stories just go ahead and use a time before we were all attached to the hip at our phones. Yes, this could have been fleshed out a little more as it's a bit surface level, but then again, it's a 2-hour free teaser game and not a full title. Honestly, I think that whole free short game teaser, whatever you want to call it, really saves them a lot of trouble and critique, because I had a great overall experience, new emotions, new set pieces, new Silent Hill. Who am I to complain when all they asked of me is 2 hours? There's a couple of puzzles here and there, and the final encounter is as fun as it is frustrating, bringing the player to a satisfying enough conclusion just at the point where they would kind of need to introduce new gameplay mechanics or new ideas if they wanted to keep attention for longer. The final encounter, spoilers ahead of course, is this long chase after a huge reveal about Anita's backstory, and there's these set pieces, which are basically keys that you have to collect while being chased by the cherry blossom monster. Do you remember those Slenderman games where you run through a maze-like area, or even the forest one, where your goal is finding a set number of pages and then the game's done? Welcome to Silent Hill's version of that. They try and improve on the concept a little bit by making the sheets these beautiful little set pieces that tie into the new backstory that we learn right before this chase. But it's all in all a chase sequence where you have to stop and pick things up. You don't even have the time to stop and think or even honestly take a good look at the set pieces they've honestly taken the time to set up for you. It could have honestly just been sheets on the ground and the wall. After collecting all the set pieces, instead of the game ending, the locked door at the end of the maze gets unlocked and you can finally step through and end the game. I enjoyed the maze, and there's some really fun random encounters, like opening a door and doing the classic 180 and bolt away. Or when you've arrived to the end door, but it's actually still locked, they give you just enough room in that little area that you can actually dodge out of the cherry blossom monster's way in a method that kind of only works in video games. All in all, I had a lot of fun. And if this was longer or cost more money, I would expect more ideas, location, and thrills. But as it is, this is a fun teaser for future Silent Hill projects. This is a new step for the Silent Hill series, and I'm really excited to see what's next for the brand. I'm not even going to mention that weird movie streaming Twitch game. The Short Message is free to all PlayStation 5 owners, and it's less than a couple of hours long. If you like Silent Hill at all, give this a try, you won't regret it. Another game I played this month was Diablo 2 Resurrected, a remaster of the original Diablo 2 and its expansion on the Xbox Series console. Diablo 2 is a top-down hack-and-slash video game developed by Blizzard North that came out in June of 2000 on PC and Mac, technically. It follows the events of Diablo 1. But you don't need to know anything about that, as the story is not really what this game is about. This game is about looting, dealing more and more damage over time, leveling up your character, and managing your build and skill trees. You can just turn your brain off and grind, or you can rush through areas to find the next goal and then ride off into the sunset. Disclaimer, there's no rideable horses in this game. Diablo 2 was a phenomenon for a reason. It's placed very high on multiple greatest game of all time lists, and fans continue to play the original and the remaster to this day. The addictive gameplay the game essentially pioneered has been copied to death and eventually honestly done better at certain points, but nothing beats the feeling of the original. The nostalgia and communities built around this game and its expansion Lord of Destruction continue to grow, as the remaster has introduced an entirely new generation to the Diablo franchise. I've been a Diablo fan since I was young, connecting the computers via LAN wires at my cousin's house all together so we could play through the first act, and then my parents would inevitably tell me it's time to go home. I never actually finished the title. Well, I still haven't even finished the title, but I've started on the quest again. I finished Diablo 3 when it came out, going through co-op with a friend, and I had an amazing time. I just thought now was the time to try out the remaster before getting Diablo 4 on Game Pass and watching hundreds of hours evaporate before me. As for actually playing the game, I'm currently in Act 2, the Sand level, thank you Mario games, and I'm playing as a sorcerer. The difficulty is definitely higher than Diablo 3, and my god, the inventory is super annoying to handle. It's tiny. Where I'm at in the game right now, there are enemies that spawn electricity all around you when you hit them, and I've gotten easily surrounded multiple times. I'm running around with half my inventory just being potions and the 2 tomes that hold all of my scrolls. I would call this a novice playthrough, as I have no idea if my build will hold up late game, but I have this loose idea of building up a fire sorceress, which seems to be leading me down a pretty good path so far. The exploration is fun, as I don't know any of the areas, and the randomly generating maps are a huge plus that I don't think were in Diablo 3, but I'm honestly not sure. I recently got to a new town and the sun just went out. Weird, but okay. New quest unlocked, find out what happened with the sun. I'm pretty basic like that. Technically, according to the game settings, I'm playing online, although I'm not really seeing any other players, so it just seems to be adding weird lag and skips to my playthrough. However, I think doing so is the only way to actually have my progress saved to my account rather straight to the console, so I'll continue dealing with that, I guess. Currently, I'm hovering around level 20 and I'm feeling a little nervous about progress, but that's nothing a couple of hours of grinding can't fix. And then I went to the town and hired a mercenary who's honestly probably better than me at this point, so I'm gonna kind of have to level up and around him. I'm not sure if the enemies he kills gives me experience, so I might just be setting myself up for a big error later on, but we will see. Diablo 2 is a game of its time, and a remaster isn't what's going to fix it. In fact, they actually went out of their way to not change anything about the original, as Diablo 2 Resurrected it's not even a literal port of the first game, it's a literal coat of paint. The original game is playing underneath, and you can actually change the view to go back to the original, and my god, does it look horrible. I cannot believe I put that many hours into this. The remaster is, in my opinion, the definitive way to try out and even play through this classic for the first time. My farthest playthrough when I was a kid saw me beginning Act 3, and if all goes to plan, I will actually be seeing the end boss Diablo, I think, himself eventually. Finally, I started and finished the original Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube. This was my first time trying out Luigi's Mansion, and I was honestly pretty amazed. I actually made a full review video about this that came out on my channel. I'll link it in the description below. Those of you that just want the quick gist of this game, this is for you. Luigi's Mansion is Resident Evil 1 for kids, kind of. Essentially, Mario and Luigi apparently won a mansion through a contest they don't even remember signing up for. This was a time before scam calls and letters were so widespread, even your grandma knows better. Anyways, our gullible brothers decide to head out. Mario sets off immediately, but Luigi stays home and says he'll follow along sometime later. When he finally shows up, he learns that Mario has been captured, and the only way to save him is to Ghostbusters style vacuum up all the ghosts in the haunted mansion. The gameplay is where this game shines. You explore the mansion, and in most rooms there's a ghost residing inside with a puzzle to be solved, and then you gotta vacuum him up. The kicker is that each room ghost and puzzle is actually super different. There are 23 of these unique encounters. The combat of Luigi's Mansion is the definition of simple to learn and difficult to master. Bear with me here. To successfully win an encounter, you're supposed to flash your flashlight on the ghost, but only for a split second. Then while the heart is showing, but before the ghost itself disappears, you're expected to start vacuuming in the correct direction, even while the ghost is still moving. And then once the ghost is attached, you must continue to not only let the ghost go, but move both analog sticks around to continually weaken the ghost and also not be hit by any of the other hazards or other enemies in the room. Sometimes the enemy will seemingly be able to disconnect itself on its own. I think it's because of where your sticks are aiming, but I'm still kind of working on that. If you're aiming in the same direction as the enemy's going, the pull weakens and the enemy can disconnect himself. Seems pretty simple, right? Honestly, throughout my entire playthrough, I was never able to vacuum up a boss enemy in one go, but it is definitely possible. It's insane, but it's super addictive once you actually get the hang of the combat. Luigi's Mansion is honestly an all-time great game and has quickly moved up my favorite games list after just one playthrough. If you would like to hear my thoughts more in depth on Luigi's Mansion, I've linked my video in the description below. That's all the games I played for February 2024, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know what you thought of it. If you have any game recommendations, go ahead and post them in the comments. I'm really open to trying them out and featuring them in my next Now Playing video. Thanks for watching till the end, and I'll see you next time.